What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above for the 2 days where our beloved stock market is closed, aka the weekend, right? So jumping right into our Bitcoin 4-hour chart, there's a couple of things I want to address. First one is why we named last week's video Bitcoin needs a pullback, right? We've essentially gotten that pullback here, but it's not ideal, right? What would have been ideal would be if coming up from the bottom, so here to here, into resistance, pulling back for a higher low, and then boom, trend continuation. Instead, what we got, and of course we have to deal with reality here, is we got sideways grind sort of higher, and now a much more mechanical pullback. What I mean by mechanical is that this is controlled, right? Making higher or lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, so on and so forth, which means the buyers now have a lot more work to do than if we just simply saw or, had seen something that looked like this, right? So that's my point here. All I'm trying to get at is now what you need to monitor in Bitcoin going forward has to be this resistance trend line. Do we break it or do we not? Do we continue to form lower highs? Does this controlled little downtrend here remain intact, or do we break it and we resume the larger, of course, daily uptrend, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see if we call this the major low. This is certainly a higher low, equal low, higher low would have formed right in here. So of course, we're not arguing that it's a huge downtrend or this is a bear market in Bitcoin, not at all. What we're simply saying is there's some work to be done now up and over this resistance trend line, and it does look like it's coming into play now, so it should resolve over the weekend. If it does break, again, all of this is going to act as overhead supply, and anyone who is looking for the 50,000 breakout, if they are weak-handed, right, they could potentially turn into a seller here looking to get out at break even, which is why, again, we're looking for some resistance at that point. So again, more work to be done than if we just saw a simple pullback and then trend continuation. So that's all I have to say here on Bitcoin. Upside targets on the break of 50K. Of course, this pivot high in here close to 50,625 will be in play, and then really after that, it's upside targets around 51,000, and then we have 53,000 way up here. Again, not really anticipating that's in play over the weekend, but those are the numbers to watch. To the downside, as we mentioned, this is the higher low, so it should hold going forward. If it's violated, I would expect another equal low to here at 44,825, and if this breaks, it will start to act as a flush point, right? The more touches we get to it, any consolidation here, boom, the next move does open the door down towards 41,000, which would not be so hot for Bitcoin. Again, I'm not calling for that. Those are simply the numbers. I think what you need to watch into the weekend is simply the resistance trend line and what happens there, what happens with this 4-hour controlled little downtrend. Does it change? Do we shift the trend up, or does it remain intact to the downside? Next up, we'll check in on Litecoin, and Litecoin's a totally different beast simply because I would argue the trend here are not really trend. It's just neutral, right? It's more sideways. We don't have a clear set of higher lows. This is arguably more of an equal low to what we had here. If you want to get technical and break out nuance on me, sure, it isn't quite as low as this, but it's really an equal low instead of an obvious higher low, thus preserving the uptrend. So I'm going to call this one more neutral here in Litecoin, and what I think the risk you really have to watch for here is simply a double top, right? If we do this, there's top number 2. This is going to act as the neckline here at 163. So please, if you're going to have any level on your Litecoin chart, it has to be this one. If it breaks to the downside, not so hot. This should ideally move the distance of this, right? So, just to give you some ideas of where that's going, that's 156 and then 147. That would be a conservative move to the downside if the double top truly does play out. I'm not calling for that to be the case. I'm simply saying that's the pattern. Those are the numbers that would be in play. To the upside, right? If we do see continuation, if this is really going to act as more of an area of balance and we're simply going to move from the low end all the way up to the up end, which again would be a probable scenario if Bitcoin sees trend reversal on that 4-hour, then we're simply looking at overhead targets here, 178, 184, and then of course the top end of this balance, the now double top, which could turn into a triple top at 189, the whole number 189.50 if you like using those nasty decimals here in the crypto world. So those are upside targets. Again, it's more of a neutral trend here. I wouldn't be overly aggressive to the long side, and I wouldn't be overly skeptical unless we either break this to the downside and start to fall apart underneath the pretense of a double top pattern inside of Litecoin. Next up, we have Ethereum, and Ethereum is different as well. It's not as neutral as what we saw in Litecoin, but it's also not as bullish as what we saw in Bitcoin. Clearly, we are respecting this support trend line, so we would call that a major low. This, of course, would be a higher low. This, of course, is another higher low instead of equal lows like what we saw inside of Litecoin. For now, we're sort of, forming a U, right? Something like this. Ideally, we get a little period of consolidation, and then boom, next target is up here at 33.45. After that, from the daily perspective, or just zooming this chart way out, if I do something like this, go with auto, So you can see our next overhead targets are coming from prior support, then turned resistance at 34.30, and then here, of course, we have a shelf at 35.82, 3,500 round number psychological will be baked in there as well. But for now, those, are quite a ways away. I'm not anticipating we get there all in one go. Again, if Bitcoin remains bullish, I do think this has the possibility to come here into the weekend. After that, you're going to have to monitor and see what the reaction is. Ideally, we get a higher low and then boom, something like that for trend continuation. Do note, again, the support trend line is intact. Any sort of moves to the downside should respect now this 31.50 mark, simply because we have a number of touches as prior support, then offering support, and then resistance here. Ideally, if we're making upward and forward progress, right, we should do something like this and use that area as the next higher low from this 4-hour perspective. So that's going to wrap up Ethereum here. As it sits right now, again, wouldn't be overly aggressive given the fact that it's come all the way from these lows, blasted through resistance, and now getting into resistance once again, kind of due or looks like it could use a higher low and boom, something like that for continuation higher. Cardano is up next, and as we know, this one is the most volatile, but also has the most relative strength inside of the crypto world. So just zooming the chart out, just so you can see, we are above and trading into blue sky territories if we take out this 292 mark here. And after that, of course, we have psychological 3, but really after that, playing 10-cent marks as well as 25-cent and 50-cent marks as resistance in Cardano if we get into blue sky territories. Just like the title of last week's video, Cardano needs a pullback, right? Just like we discussed, a couple of minutes ago in Bitcoin, ideally coming from the bottom all the way up to the top into known resistance, all-time high, this does something like this. Pulls back, forms a higher low. Maybe it's in here if we just take out our drawing tool. Ideally, it holds that, right, at $2.79. We do something like this, put in a 4-hour bull flag, fantastic, boom, there's your breakout up and over highs for healthy trend continuation. If we see something that looks like what Bitcoin did, right, where it slowly dribbles higher, kind of sideways, then I do think we'll be in store at some point for a move back down into the support trend line that might look something like that. So that's why I'm thinking, that's how you think about, rather, whenever you come from a nuanced level into another nuanced level with no break in between, you need some sort of pullback. You need to give the buyers some sort of chance to catch their breath. Otherwise, it doesn't strike me as the most risk-friendly entry, taking a breakout after the buyers have already done so much work getting into this known area of resistance. So those are my thoughts there. A pullback into the support trend line, if that does happen, would be a buy, simply because we are looking for trend continuation, right? It's clearly in an uptrend, clearly exhibiting relative strength. A line in the sand here has to be here at $2.40-ish cents. It's simply this prior cluster of lows, there. If that does break, then as you know, we are looking for a move much lower. I would consider this in here at 188 in play if this is given up. So next up, we're going to move over to Doge, and these are the coins, again, that I'm not so interested in, but really keep in here for the people. For now, Doge is kind of back testing this prior area of support. You can see support. Now, again, back testing. Whenever you're coming from a point of support into resistance with no pullbacks in between, you have to imagine the first implication would be a higher low, and then boom, something like that if we truly are going to get trend continuation. Don't forget, though, this is in an overall downtrend. We had a symmetrical triangle in play, something that looked like that. Obviously, it broke it to the downside, so we are favoring, more downside activity. But given the nature of what's happened here, maybe the next short point was here inside of Dogecoin. I don't even know if you can short this thing. Maybe you just avoid longs if you start to get into this area, looking for the lower high and then roll over back underneath. The sort of line in the sand to the downside on something like this, I would just argue a psychological 25-cent mark, simply because of the cult nature of this coin. We've talked about it in the past. Whenever you have something that's really obvious or something people can just tweet about online and get excited about buying a potential round coin number like that, 25-cent quarter mark, then it's probably going to hold this support, right? So that would be my target to the downside if the Dogecoin really does start to fall apart. Not too excited about looking for upside targets here over 30 cents. Next up, we'll go over to Ripple. And again, Ripple, a bit of a different picture, kind of equal lows like what we saw in Litecoin. And we do have a small downtrend in place. So you could do something like this. And you can see we're getting into that resistance trend line now. So anchor, touch 1 is here and getting into it right now. So if we do break it, next level up above is $1.17. After that, we have prior shelf of support, which will act as resistance at 1.2211. And then, of course, you can just walk these levels up. Just like Bitcoin, I think this one is going to hinge upon what happens at this resistance trend line into the weekend. If it comes back down and retest this area here at 1.05, then that's going to definitely turn into a flush point, right? It was a prior breakout. If it does give it up on this next touch, third touch, that's kind of an opening of the door, if you will, to lower levels. As we know, we have 0.93, and then after that, way down here at at 0.80. Again, I'm not saying you're going to look for that as an actual short, but just avoid longs if we do get rejected and probably come back into here. It wouldn't be my first choice to go long on a retest of this area of support, simply because it'll start to act as more of a flush point the more touches we get in close proximity, right? Something like this. Eventually it's going to go and boom, you get that move lower. Next up, we're going to look at Stellar, the last one on our list. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video so far. This one always amazes me. It always has something going on with volume when we're looking at it. And just look at this, right? So big reversal to the upside happening on some really solid volume. We'll see if we can get upside continuation in a name like Stellar. For now, equal lows. So again, it's more of a neutral trend as opposed to a, healthy uptrend or healthy downtrend. Sure, you could make the argument there's something like this, like we did in the last coin, but we're starting to break that. So I would argue over 35 cents, this can run into our next point of resistance, which first of all, I would have to make your attention to that there at 0.3616. After that, 0.3697, so on and so forth. You can walk these levels up and look at them manually. As the chart currently sits, again, am I really excited about going long here? And not really. I would probably look for other opportunities, probably that higher low situation in Cardano. That would be my first choice in terms of what to watch for in the crypto space. Just like we talked about in Ripple here, if we get a retest, so say we roll over here at 0.35, a retest to 0.33, again, this is going to turn and start to act as more of a flush point. Next critical support underneath is going to be here at 0.3103, and then the support trend line, which hasn't been tested in quite some time. You can see where it's coming in from. I'm not sure how it'll hold up. It's something to watch for, but it's not something I would place a whole ton of trust in. I wouldn't go long my entire account if we got down into that support trend line just because it's there, right? You need to see other things that are happening that might signal a reversal. As the chart currently sits, again, kind of just neutral here, not really showing its hand and what it wants to do into the weekend. So if you enjoyed the video, if you learned anything new, if you're happy to keep tabs on crypto, let me know in the comments section or by giving the video a thumbs up. Don't forget that our weekly watch list is coming out on Sunday. That's, of course, our core list of companies to watch and a couple of good trade ideas towards the end. And I wish you all a green trading week.